Okay, so today we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about science fiction and horror music, but we're also going to talk about the orchestration a little bit more. And we're going to talk about two things: sustained string articulations and revoicing chords and how that all works emotionally and sonically. So let me go here and then here. Oops, wrong camera. All right, I'm not going to go there. Okay. So I'm going to play a little passage for you. And it's sustained strings. And I've got them broken out into their 5 instruments: first violin, second violins. I've got them recorded as audio here, but this is the notes that I'm playing. It's a very short passage. So this is just regular strings with regular articulation, just sustained notes. One more time. And this latest update to Pro Tools really messed up the MIDI editor notation window. It's really weird. Okay, so we see here, except for the first note, I've got 4 note textures all the way through, and the chords are going down in parallel motion pretty much until the end, where we've got a little contrary motion here. And what these are 7th chords. So this first note is B on the top, then F sharp, B, A, and D. So if I align those notes up in thirds, we've got B, D, F sharp, and A, or a B minor 7th chord. And then the next chord is the same voicing, down a whole step for an A minor 7th chord. Then over here it's a little different. We've got D, G, F sharp, and B. That's a G major 7th. The next one is an E minor 7th, then an E11, and then to this weird chord over here, which is 5th, C and G, and then G flat or F sharp, G and D, to a C over D, and then to an E. So what these chords are right here, what they're called, with that kind of configuration, they're called, and Peter Minetti may know this, and if Lucas was here, he probably might know this also. They're called drop 2 chords. And why are they called drop 2 chords? Well, if I took this note here and I moved it up an octave, right, to D, right, these are all now in close position. That means there's no space. No chord tones can fit between each successive note. So that's close position. Then we take the second note from the top and we drop it down an octave. And that gives us this, what's called drop 2. So that's what I'm doing there. So it's just basically 7th chords, and that's with the 7th in the lowest pitch here, A, G, F sharp, D, in drop 2. So then the 7th is now the 2nd from the bottom. So it's also, another way to look at it is it's 2/5, right? So we got D and A right here, and then a whole step apart we've got B and F sharp. And then over here the 5ths are a half step apart. So I'm moving these around in 5ths. Just gives you different textures. So that's what's going on harmonically and the chords there. So that's the sustained strings. Now, let's play it one more time, and let's bring out our frequency analyst. All right, this is our friend here. And I'll play that again, and we'll take a look at what it looks like. So this orange line is what it was when it was at its loudest, but the relative shape until the bass notes came in stayed fairly consistent, and then we got a little more energy over here. Now, the next articulation I'm going to play is called con sordino, and that means with mutes. And so, like if you think about a violin or a viola or even a cello, there's a spot where the string goes over, like if my hand's on the string, there's a spot where the string goes over a little piece of wood. And that piece of wood is just like on a guitar, it's called the bridge. All right. And what they do is they put a little piece of rubber or plastic that has little slots for each string down by the bridge so that it covers each string. And what that does is it cuts down the amount of overtones that the instrument is producing, and it makes what they call a muted sound. So let's take a listen to with mutes, and let's listen to what that, let's take a listen and a watch. Let me clear the memory and do it one more time. And actually, let me bring the volume of this up. It's much too soft. Okay, here we go. Two things. At the very beginning, you saw sort of like a negative spike in this area here. That's one thing. That was interesting. But generally speaking, the line here is much smoother than it is. You see how many more curves there are here? Right? That's because there's more overtones and there are more individual pitches. It's a little bit smoother here. You're bring the volume of those higher harmonics down. So now let's take a listen to bowed legato, and that's like where the notes are attached. Let's take a listen to what that sounds like. So that's not really a great representation of what bowed legato sounds like, but basically what's happening there, I think anyway, is that every time you're changing a pitch, you're changing the bow, but you're really using your left hand to sort of make sure that the notes are really connected on the string from one into the next. And it's interesting. I'm not sure if I like that articulation, but let's take a listen one more time. You see, it had that negative spike that the concertino did, but it's you could see it's louder. But these are still smoother than just the sustained notes, right? So that's the difference there. And then over here we've got fingered legato, which means that you're doing it with your left hand on the fingerboard. You're sliding your fingers to do the legato or moving your fingers on it, and you're connecting it that way more so, and the bow is just naturally moving back and forth at a certain pace. That's sort of how I think about it. Let's take a listen. So it sounded different than the previous legato, right? You can hear that it's smoother. Still has that negative spike over here around 1000. It's interesting. Okay, so sul punticello. So that means playing near the bridge, right? So, let me show you something. Some of you probably know this, but now this is with an electric guitar, and I'll move the microphone down. So, an electric guitar is set up a lot like a violin if I were to play like this, right? You got strings, a fingerboard, and you got a bridge. So, depending upon what I do with my right hand will affect the sound of even just an electric guitar, right? So if I play, let's see if I can get this up here high enough. If I play up here if I play a couple of notes here and I'm picking over the fingerboard, right? It's a nice round sound. Now watch what happens as I move my hand down towards the bridge. See how this side is really spiky down by the bridge? I'm trying to keep the same. Right, so it gets very nice and round here. And with a nice sustain, right? And then the closer to the bridge you get, it gets spikier. So that when you're down at the bridge, there's very little sustain. And you really have to whack those strings to get any volume out of it. It's the same thing with a bow on a violin. So if you're playing sul ponticello, it's going to be a little spikier, right? So let's listen to what that sounds like. You could see a lot of activity here. And a lot of activity here. So there's a lot of overtones in that one. Flautando is another soft articulation, and it means flute-like. So you're playing very delicately. So this will be very smooth. Very interesting how the beginning of that had a lot of harmonic activity. Look at the shape of the yellow line when it gets here. It's very spiky. See that? And then it smooths off as I get lower in pitch. Except right here, that half step rub gets really emphasized. And so let's see, let's go on. Now we'll move here, right? So one of the ways that a violin player is expressive and makes the sound really move is that they vibrate their finger on the string, and that makes almost like a vocal quality with the violin. Now again with the guitar, like a violinist, they'll do that. With a guitar, it's right. It's more you move the string up and down, although you can vibrate like that, and that's sort of like what B.B. King did. But most people, when they think about vibrato on a guitar, it's one of two things. One of three things. It's typically you bend a string, and then you're sort of rocking it, and I'm exaggerating it. You're changing the pitch that way. It is this, but it's also for vibrato on a guitar. You have a contraption down here, a tremolo bar or a whammy bar, and you can play that to make whole chords have vibrato. So, same thing similar on the violin, although a violin doesn't have a whammy bar, a Bigsby or Kahler or anything else. It's funny. So this is molto vibrato. You can see how there is so much more close harmonic activity up here, right? Yeah, so what's interesting about that is that you're sort of messing around with the tonality of the piece, because all of these notes that you're playing are slightly out of tune at any given point. So one violin player could be a little bit sharp, and another the one person sitting next to them in the section could be a little bit flat, and then another person could be right on pitch, and then another person could be even more flat, depending upon their individual style of vibrato. So you've got all of these different opinions about where the pitch should be and what the vibrato should be, and when that all plays together, it creates a very harmonically rich sound, which is really interesting, I think. So let's take a listen again. So that's interesting. And then there's something called tremolo. And tremolo is where they'll play a note, and then the right hand will go very quickly like this, and it'll give you like essentially like you're playing very fast single pitches, that kind of a thing. And when you've got a lot of violinists in a section playing it together, it doesn't sound so measured like their 16th notes. They're just this just under like sort of undulating sound you get. It's really a great articulation. A violin with a whammy bar. Yeah, sure. That would be funny. Maybe you could retrofit one. Now, the libraries that you guys might have, might not have all these different articulations on them, right? So what are some ways that you can simulate these things, right? Well, let's take our sustained strings at the beginning here. I'm going to turn my AC on. Give me 1 sec. Well, you know that it's got some less overtones, right? So why don't I have a master track here, which actually should be down here. So let's put in, I'm going to put in the 7-bit, I'm going to put in an EQ where we can see what's happening. All right. You guys don't have this most likely, but this will show the waveform here. All right, this is just like the EQ3 7-band that I've taught some of you guys, but this is just a one made by Waves where you could see the waveform in here, and it's very helpful. So let's play the sustained strings patch. And now let's play the muted strings. So there seems to be less volume in this area here. So what if I brought this down like this? And then now let's bypass that. Let's move this up here, get rid of some. Oh, it's bypassed. No wonder I can't hear it. I went too far. Hold on. Let's go right here. There we go. That's getting more like it. So it won't be exactly the same. So you don't have muted strings in your library. Well, you get rid of some of the overtones, right? You just doesn't sound quite the same. right? But this is the regular strings, and that would be muted strings, right? I mean, it's not the same, but it gives you a different timbre, so that if you're scoring a sensitive section and you want to do a demo of it and you don't have this, use technology to help you, right? Legatos I can't help you out with, but let's take a look at this sul ponticello. Okay, so there's things about that I can't really simulate, right? So let's reset this. Full reset. And let's go back here. Yeah, so there's a lot more energy in this area here, right? So let's see. And then another thing you can do, because it sounds a little edgier, right, is maybe you could put some sort of something to drive the sound a little bit. So there's a free plugin by this company called SoftTube. Oh, come on. It's not a saturation knob, right? So, yeah. So I'm going to keep the low end the way it is, and I'm just going to saturate a little bit. That's a little bit louder than we need, so let's keep this up here. Let's go back here, and let's take the output down. A little more saturation. That's a little too much saturation. So that could be more, that's just using technology to help you, get articulations you can't really get. It doesn't sound the same, but if you're writing with Discover and it only has sustained strings and tremolo strings and short strings and pizzicatos, that's what you're stuck with. Right? So you can use technology to help you out a little bit until you can afford to purchase these additional sounds. Okay. Now, you've heard that arrangement ad nauseum, correct? So let's play around now with different Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're right here now. And what I've done is I've changed the order of notes again. So you see here, this A is very close to the B. And on this version here, I've dropped that A an octave lower. And I've done that with the same relative voice in every chord. So in other words, this G would be an octave higher, this F sharp would be an octave higher, this D would be an octave higher, and the same with this until we get to the last three chords. So instead of it being, oh, hold on, let me get rid of that, all that processing on the master bus. So instead of it being, it's now, right? That's a much different sound. So let's take a listen to that. So that has a different emotional content as far as I'm concerned to it than the closer positioned one, right? All right. Now with the next one here, we've that goes from here over to here. It's bad spacing, stupid Pro Tools. Okay. So over here, you see that everything looks close together, and I've dropped it down an octave. So our B minor 7th chord is in an inversion, but it's all the notes are close together with no space, no chord tones in between any of them. And then the same thing over here. And then open it up, right? So this has yet another sound to it. Right, that's really nice. And maybe you've got with something like that, because you've got so many notes in the mid-range, you could, that might be nice if a woman is speaking and her voice is a little bit higher than that, or if you wanted to add, like, let's say a flute melody on top of that, up above that, would be nice accompaniment, very rich, very harmonically rich in terms of all those chords are close together. So it adds a lot of really cool harmonics. Now on the next one here, right, we've gone to things being spaced out a little bit more. Let's make that bigger so we can easily see it. Here we go. So here, our original voice had this note here right next to this A here, and I jumped it up an octave, right? And then that follows the pattern until we get to the end. And then over here, I've taken this note, which is here, I've gotten rid of the 5th, but I've taken this note and I've dropped it down an octave here. So that's a little different change. So this, again, completely different sound here. And also I've opened up the spacing on these chords here too, on these chords here, right? You can see that there's more space than their counterparts over here. Now on this one here, that top note has been moved down to the bottom. Interesting, right? And then there's an interesting, so you've got thirds and these bottom notes, F sharp and A, and then the top two notes are a D and a B. So it's thirds on the bottom and interval of a sixth on the top. So that's kind of interesting. So let's take a listen to this. Now on this one here, again, that original melody note is on the bottom, but here, instead of everything going down, these are going up in pitch, right? And then here, look at this huge spread we've got over here. We've got C all the way up an octave and a half to F sharp, right? We've got a big spread between all that stuff. It's a very different sound. So I'm going to play that again. And one thing that happens with a passage like this, that it's so spread out, the notes, that you start hearing the individual voices of each line a little bit more clearly because there's a lot of space in between them. So in other words, let me show you on the piano. So if I play chords like this that are really close together, right? Like let's see. Right? You can't pick out, I can't pick out the individual lines. But if I play something that's more aligned like this, you can hear there's more clarity in the voicings. You can hear that there are 4 voices there, and eventually, if you work at it, you can pick out each line a lot easier because there's a lot of space in between the individual voices, and that sort of gives you a different feel. Okay, on this last one, you notice that we've really swapped things around, right? The bass, that low note is now in the bass clef, and things are moving all over the place. These are all the same pitches on each chord, they're just being arranged differently. Here, let's take a listen. So what's nice, I like this a lot, and what's nice about this is that you can see that there are different shapes on each right hand, except here they're similar. Between these 2 chords here, they're similar, but all the shapes are different in the right hand, which gives you like more independence of the voices. So this one is really cool, and this is just, you're basically right. It's very ethereal and a little bit more unsettled because on this last chord, it's an E triad. Instead of having an E on the bottom, I've got a G sharp on the bottom. So it's a little bit unsettled. Now, so the concept here is that each chord, I have a unified texture all the way through. Each chord has a certain number of voices to it. So here I've got 4 voices except for the last couple of chords. There's 5 voices. So each one of those notes can be put into a different octave, and you can follow you can do one of 2 things. You can follow the line through, so that let's say if the top notes get moved to the bottom, that line is now on the bottom instead of the top, or you can just rearrange every chord individually, and then you get really interesting textures that way, right? This is not something that's taught in theory classes, but this is how I think about harmonies when I want to do variations, right? So, in other words, let's say you've got something that goes like this. Right? Very simple, right? Right? So that's basically E minor, D, C, major 7th, right? Okay, so right? That's different, right? Different. I'm trying to figure out different voicing. So if I have these big tenths up here, right? Right. So instead of the right hand being, you're doing something like maybe ba, bum. Different, it just feels different. And it may, like having all of this understanding of harmony. And I know it's like a little bit above some of you, but it's something to work towards. Having a really firm grasp on harmony is one of the greatest ways to learn how to effectively communicate emotion to your audience, because rhythm is definitely the most important part of music, and melody is what people listen to, but harmony is what makes people feel. And so how do you learn harmony? Well, there's lots of ways to learn harmony. But for all of you that are not keyboard players, learn all of your major triads in every key, your minor triads, and learn all the inversions. So just as the basics, right? So if this is a C major triad, you got C, E, and G. Well, you move the bottom note up and you got E, G, and C, and you move the bottom note up and you've got G, C, and E. Those are your inversions. So you should be able to play like... That's a major triad in every key going up fourth, right? Same thing. That's a major triad in first inversion in on every pitch. I'm not going down chromatically. And then the last one. Right? You should get to the point where, like, if you spend... What I always tell people when they're working on stuff like this is if you spend 15 minutes a day, 3 or 4 times a week, and you have a targeted practice just to increase your harmonic vocabulary. So let's say you're going to do, you want to do triads. Let's just for an example. Well, you spend 15 minutes, right? So you realize that this is something that is going to take you several years to get through. So you want slow, careful, and targeted practice. So let's say it's Monday, and on Monday you're going to spend 15 minutes and you're just going to learn C major, F major, B flat, and E flat major, all the inversions. So you just practice. Until you can do that, and then slowly with no mistakes. The same thing with F. Same thing with B flat. And same thing with E flat, right? And then once you can do that, then maybe what you'll do is you'll go C, F, B flat, E flat, right? And then first inversion, same thing. And you'll go through it that way. Then another way you could do it is you could say, how do I move from one chord to the next by moving the least amount of notes? So that means what tones are common between the two chords. So between a C chord and an F chord, the C is common. And between an F and a B flat chord, the F is common. And then between a B flat and an E flat chord, the E flat is common. So then you'll practice. And then you do the same thing with the inversion. So, and then, right? And then you're starting to learn and acquire this vocabulary, get it into your fingertips. Everybody does need to learn keyboards to be a good composer. You can do it on the guitar, sort of, but you do need to know the basics of keyboard harmony and stuff, even if you're not inputting stuff into a sequencer, because that's where you get your interest. You don't have to be a great pianist, but just learn your basic chord progressions. And then once you get all your triads done, then you move into seventh chords, right? So this is why it's never ending. I spend time every week, even at my advanced age, working on learning more harmonic content. But you saw that, like, I had all that other stuff, the basics, under my fingers. I do go back and still review that every month or two. I'll spend a week just going through all the basics for 20 minutes a day, just to reiterate that it's in my hands. And once it's in your hands, it'll be easier for you to assimilate it into a piece of music you write. All right, so that's the second half of string articulations. We did short a couple of weeks ago, and now we've done some long ones. I hope that everybody's started on the project. Is that a yes or a no? Yay, nay? So any questions that you have about that, right? You're going to be handing in the first draft next week. Now, I'm going to see where you guys are at. I've sort of thrown you into the deep end of the pool, as I said last week. You're going to struggle with this. Thank you, Salita. You're going to struggle with this, but that's okay. That's the only way you're going to learn, right? I'm not going to kill you for your grade. Just work on it and do a sincere effort. And when I give you feedback, do the feedback. So we'll see how we are. Like you'll hand in the first draft next week. I'll give you feedback, and then the following week you'll hand in another version, and we'll see where we're at. We may extend it out another week, but you do have to hand the things in when I ask you to. That would be very helpful. So we'll see where we're at, because the next project you get will be the final, which will be a little bit more the same thing, but a little bit longer. So I want to make sure that we're in good shape. And this one's it's only 60 seconds long. I've given you the tempo to write at and to choose from, and I've given you the ensemble and demonstrated to you last week how I would go about doing it. And hopefully you could pick up some ideas from that. I haven't started yet due to technical. Right. I got you, Peter. No problem. Oh, there are feedback videos up for you for last week. I sent an email out about that. Everybody did a good job. Everybody's could be better, just like my work can be better, but it's a good job overall. All right, let's close this out. So I want to show you one interesting thing about timing. I've got a video to play for you. So we're working in timing to a click track, right? And you can do a lot with a click track, and I'd say most films today are done with a click track. Excuse me. But what if you want something that's a little less metronomic, a little less rigid, a little bit more flowing, but you still need to have things hit at a particular time? Well, there's this method that has been around for decades called punches and streamers. And what this is a method of giving the conductor a heads up as to when the next cue, as the next hit point in the cue should be. So what is a punch and a streamer? Well, it starts off with a streamer. And what happened was they'd make a work copy of the film, and somebody, not the composer, would take a nail or a knife and a ruler, right? And they'd mark off on the film these spots, and then they would etch right into the film and just remove some of the color. So you'd see this white line going across the film. And when it got from, I think it went from left to right, most likely did. But when it gets all the way to the right, they'd take a hole punch and punch a hole in the film. So there'd be this big bright flash in your face, right? So the conductor would be conducting. They'd get the, they get the tempo. They'd hear it on the metronome or whatever. They'd start the piece off, and the cue is going. And on the score, they've got marked where certain things are, and you should be about at this spot. But when there's a definite hit point coming up, you'll see that it gets white, it moves across the line, and hits this big flash, and then the conductor should be at that point. So if he needs to speed up a little bit or slow down a little bit, right? And you're capturing basically a performance, and it may take a few times through to get the right performance, but that was a method of, and I would imagine that it's still used today, not as often, But for certain types of films with, well, you know, the director and the composer want to have something that's more flowing, more loose feel to the music, they're using this, right, where they're actually capturing a performance instead of it just being a click track and everything lining up to the click track. So let's take a look at something I've got here for us. Okay, so this is a little over, it's about 3.5 minutes long. You'll see. Okay, so you can hear with that particular track that it's very flowing and very, you know, it's not so rigid. And you see the conductor is conducting, and he's moving along. And sometimes he gets 1, 2, 3, and he puts sort of like a hold, and then he gets ready, and he sees the streamer going across, and boom, he gets it. And it started out where he wasn't quite on on with the hits. They would have to do another take, but this is a live concert performance, so it was very good. But then as things got further on through the little clip, you saw that he started getting very accurate with his hits, and the music had a very free-flowing quality to it, which has a it's really a great way to do something like that. I just wanted to expose you to that and show it to you. All right, so Peter, what time do you have to leave?
I just have to be there around 6 or a little before 6.
Right, and you're in the music building now?
Yeah, I'm close by.
Okay, great. So that's probably where we're going to call it a day, because then it's just going to be my permanent auditor and Adrian. So we'll probably call it a day at 6. All right, let's go and look at a little bit about, and we'll pick this up in 2 weeks again from this point.